Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action, Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussions to their problems with alcohol. This is an open big book steps study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with the focus on their application in everyday life and recovery. This is the fourth session of the seventh cycle of the workshop that was presented on August 17th, 2024. Sessions 2 and 3 consisted of in-depth discussions on the unmanageability that takes us to the first step and were not recorded. In session 4, we completed the first step and then the second step. If you would like to contribute to the seventh tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, review the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. We are now starting at the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I typically do each week is I try to give a high-level overview of the previous week's work so that anybody who is coming in at any stage in the cycle will have an idea of how to catch up with what we've covered. And you also have access to the video so that you can go back and catch up on what you missed. So where we are again is in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, to just reiterate, is the book of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are the set of instructions on how to get rid of the things that are blocking us off from our higher power, how to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from alcohol making our life unmanageable. One thing we need to be aware of, however, is just reading the book without experiencing it is not useful. You get a lot of knowledge, but we cannot learn how to do anything without practicing. We can't learn how to swim by just reading the instructions on how to swim. We have to jump in the water and practice. And that's what we're doing with this work is we are studying how to apply the steps in our life. How do we actually
work them. So what we've started on is we are at step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And one of the things that we've been doing the last 2 weeks is that we have been working in the workbook on the unmanageability questionnaire, which is in the workbook starting on pages 68 and 69 and going through to the next couple of pages. And we had, over the last 2 weeks, we had some in-depth discussions around what this unmanageability looks like, because this is the beginning of step 1. And these unmanageability questions address these issues. And it's basically looking at what we call the bedevilments, in that, am I generally restless, irritable, which means easily annoyed, and discontented, which means never satisfied? Am I having trouble managing my personal relationships? Am I having trouble controlling my emotional nature? Am I prey to misery and depression? Am I having trouble making a living? Or am I having trouble at work? I'm either keeping a job or getting along with the people on my job. Do I feel useless? How do I manage it? How do I manage fear? Am I unhappy? Am I of help to other people? Do I think I know what's best for everyone? Am I driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity? Am I an extreme example of self-will run riot? Although I don't think so. Am I leading a double life? Am I walking around showing one face to the world and another face to myself and how I live my life? And am I like a tornado roaring through the lives of others? And we address these questions in depth over the last 2 weeks, which now brings us to looking at, well, what is it about me? I'm an alcoholic. And how do these relate to me being an alcoholic? Which brings us to what we call the cycle of alcoholism. And what we're going to be looking at in this cycle of alcoholism is, in the program, we have the tools of the program, and then we have the steps. And what we're going to look at is how, when we apply the tools of the program and the 12 steps, how that impacts my alcoholism. So the first thing that happens is I get feelings of being restless, irritable, discontent, shameful, remorseful, guilty. And these feelings, I don't like these feelings. These feelings do not feel good. And somewhere, somehow, as soon as this happens, I get a memory that tells me if I have a drink, I'll feel better. Now, that memory could be an unconscious memory, or it could be a specific memory of a particular event. Doesn't really matter. But this memory tells me if I have a drink, I'll feel better. So as soon as my brain believes this, I start to obsess by telling myself, I have to have a drink, I have to have a drink, I have to have a drink. And I'm telling myself over and over and over again, I've got to have a drink. I'm dying for a drink. I'll only have one. Just one drink will do it for me. And I'm obsessing. My brain is obsessing, obsessing, obsessing until I give in and I take that first drink, because I'm only going to have one. That's what I tell myself. I'm only going to have one. However, once I take that first drink, an allergy gets triggered, which causes a physical craving. So I immediately forget I was just going to have one, or I tell myself I was just going to have one. But now, once that physical craving has kicked in, it's like, what the heck? I might as well have another and another and another, because the physical craving is now in my body and I can't stop it. I have no choice but to keep on drinking and drinking and drinking until I get drunk. And I get drunk because I have this physical craving. It's a typical reaction. It's like when you go to the doctor and they hit you on the knee with that little hammer. It's an automatic bodily craving. So I get drunk and I can't stop. Now, eventually I might stop in that maybe I run out of alcohol, maybe I pass out, maybe I have an accident, maybe I get arrested. Worst case scenario, I die, but hopefully that doesn't happen, although it does happen to some of us. But something happens to make me stop. And then I start to make promises. And I tell myself, I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to do it again. And I keep that promise. And that promise can last anywhere from decades, which is the example in the big book where they talk about the man of 30 who didn't drink for 25 years. And then when he retired, got drunk and died in a couple of years. So I can keep that promise for decades or years or months or weeks, days, hours, minutes, or seconds until I start to feel restless, irritable, and discontent again. And then that memory pops in there. And then the obsession pops in there. I give into the obsession. I pick up the first drink. I trigger the physical cravings. I get drunk. Then something happens, which makes me stop. I start making the promises. So it's a cycle that happens over and over and over again. Now, when the tools of the program are used, these tools can stop you from taking the first drink and continuing on with the rest of the cycle. Some of them are the slogans, the serenity prayer, just don't drink and go to meetings, go to one meeting after the other, go to one meeting after the other, stand at the door, shake people's hands, get a sponsor, join a group, get active, lead meetings, do service work, pick up the phone before picking up a drink, make coffee, do all, and there's a lot of great stuff that we can do once we get active. Now, these tools I like to refer to as the handrails of the steps, because the handrails, when you're walking up, either up or down a flight of stairs, when you hold on to the handrail, especially if there's one on either side, but you only have to hold, you can hold on to one, they'll help you stay steady so that you can walk up or down the steps without stumbling and falling. So all of these tools are great and they give you something else to do instead of taking the first drink, which eliminates the next two steps in the cycle of an alcoholism, which is triggering the craving and the drinking binges. However, it's important to be aware that just using the tools don't mean that I'm recovered. In fact, if I'm a real alcoholic, the tools of the program may not keep me sober when I'm blindsided by some life event or my ego gets hit hard. The tools are for the short term to get me over some of life's tough hurdles. The 12 steps are for the long haul. You see, when the 12 steps are used, they stop you from believing that a drink is your solution. And then the cycle of alcoholism doesn't even start. The 12 steps allow me to stop or short circuit the negative feelings before my brain tells me I need a drink to numb those feelings. That's where we're talking about the psychic change takes place when we use the 12 steps, especially step 10, which changes my reactions to things And step 11, which guides me towards behaviors that don't cause negative feelings, and the obsession never has a chance to materialize. On the other side of step 12, my thought process has changed so dramatically that the negative feelings are just fleeting thoughts that disappear immediately. However, in order to have the obsession removed, it's important to remember that AA is a 12-step program, not a tools program. And sometimes we refer to this as white knuckling it, or they call it two-stepping. But remember, there are 12 steps and not just the first 3. So we need to remember that. And this is why it's important to work the steps. And over the years, we got away from that. We hear people just say, just don't drink and go to meetings, just don't drink and go to meetings. And you can skate along for years and never really have the psychic change. And then something happens, boom. That's where we talk about we can be a dry alcoholic, dry being that we have the symptoms of the disease. We're just not putting alcohol in our body. So to explain why alcoholism is a disease and not just a lack of willpower and moral character causing us to make bad choices, it's important to understand the difference between choice and disease. See, with choice, there is free will. There's responsibility. I can stop. Punishment and coercion do work. These involve behaviors. So that's like when a non-alcoholic has had a couple too many drinks, say at a New Year's Eve party, and they get stopped for drunk driving, and they have to pay a hefty fine and go before the judge. They can stop. They could say, oh, I've got to drive. But those are behaviors. Coercion and punishment do work for a non-alcoholic. You don't want to get that fine. You don't want to get pulled over. So you get either a designated driver or you call an Uber. With a disease, there is no free will. There is no responsibility. I can't stop. Punishment and coercion do not work. I think I'm fine. I get behind the wheel. I was always the designated driver. These involve symptoms, and the symptoms are involved in those types of things. So to look at the disease model itself, when there is a disease, there is an organ of the body that's affected by a defect, which is then accompanied by symptoms. So with the disease concept, for example, you've got that organ, there's some sort of a defect, and then there's some symptoms. So based on the disease model, diabetes is considered a disease. The organ involved is the pancreas, and the defect is that the pancreas has a problem producing insulin. And the symptoms are elevated blood glucose, blurred vision, infections, damaged nerve endings, and or coma, and death. Alcoholism fits the disease model because the organ affected is the midbrain. Remember, in the big book, it says there's something about our brains. Back in the day when it was written, they didn't know what it was. But technology and medicine has gone along, has progressed and advanced to see that the defect is a stress-induced hedonic dysregulation, which if anyone wants more information on that, I'm not going to go into all the medical stuff. I honestly can't, but I do have, if anyone is interested, I have found articles that describe what a stress-induced hedonic dysregulation is. For any of you who would be interested, just let me know. But it's long medical stuff. Just trust me, it's called a stress-induced hedonic dysregulation. Which means that the fight or flight response gets triggered too easily, and the threshold in the pleasure center is higher than it should be. The symptoms are loss of control, obsession, persistent use despite negative consequences. And again, the big book states that the disease centers in the brain. So while we may want to find different things to blame for our addiction, scientific evidence supports the theory. So years ago, scientists conducted experiments with mice, and these mice were trained to press a lever to have the pleasure center parts of their brain stimulated. And what happened was the mice did nothing but press the lever, even when the negative consequence of an electrical shock was administered every time they pressed the lever. The mice wanted nothing other than having their pleasure center stimulated, and there was nothing other than their brains that was causing this. So, what's happening in our brains? At some point in our lives, we discovered, remember, restless, irritable, and discontent. At some point in our lives, we discovered if we were stressed or unhappy, we had that memory, a drink would make us feel better. This happened so often that eventually there was a dopamine connection made between the decision making and the survival parts of the brain. So you have the executive functioning and the fight or flight response, which is the lower brain, the executive functioning, which is the higher brain. So there's kind of like a disconnect there. So it's the same as if a wild animal was barreling towards you. You automatically react to save your life by jumping out of the way and running away without having to think, oh, I better run away. Let me move my leg now, my left leg, and now my right leg. It's automatic, and it's the same with alcoholic drinking. We misinterpret our perception of what's going on as life-threatening, and we run to alcohol for comfort. In other words, something happens. I think my life is in danger. I have to drink so that I feel better. So what makes us real alcoholics is that there's no reason that can make us moderate or stop for good. When our brains believe we're in danger and that a drink is the only solution, our prior commitment to quit, any memory of what happened the last time we drank, the love we feel for our family, the knowledge of the punishment and humiliation we know awaits us if we relapse are all invisible when the decision-making part of our brain fails to be able to stop the midbrain from thinking we have to pick up this drink in order to save our lives. I think I'm going to die. How many times did I say I'm dying for a drink? Then there's the obsession. As alcoholics, our brains evoke a powerful function that sustains its connection of our drinking to our survival called obsession. Obsessing is a difficult concept. See, when a normal drinker says they need a drink, what they're really saying is they really want a drink a lot. It's important to understand that's not what the alcoholic means when they say they need a drink. Obsession is an intense emotional yearning experience. We want to think about other things. We really do. We want to think about other things. But our brain is constantly bringing us back to the drink. When obsession is present, choice is impossible. So you got an alcoholic and you put a drink in front of the alcoholic. And when he reaches it, what you do is you point a gun at his head and you tell him you're going to shoot him if he drinks. Now, based on that, he will choose not to drink. That's true. With a gun to his head, the alcoholic can, in that moment, choose not to drink. But while the alcoholic is not drinking, he's still obsessing. He doesn't have a choice not to obsess. Because of the obsession, the alcoholic is not thinking, oh, I better not drink or I'll get shot in the head. No, what he's thinking sounds more like this. I wonder if he'll really shoot me. I wonder if he even has bullets in the gun. Maybe his finger will slip off the trigger. I wonder if I can get that drink down before the bullet comes crashing through my skull. That obsession and that experience, as miserable as it is involuntary. But even knowing this will not change anything. As it's written in the big book, self-knowledge is not the answer, because the real alcoholic will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. As a real alcoholic, the only thing self-knowledge does is make me realize that I cannot take just one drink without being physically driven to take one drink after the other. This then allows me, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on that first drink. And I can only do this. This then allows me, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on that first drink. And I can only do this on a continuous basis if I'm connected to my higher power. Bill Wilson describes this very nicely in his story in the big book. Here we go. Okay, so we're talking about being connected to our higher power. It's the only way that I can do it. I have to be spiritually fit in order to pass on the first drink. And the only way to do that continuously is to be connected to my higher power, which brings me to step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. In step 2, we start to look at some questions about a higher power. But the most liberating part about the program is that we don't have to use someone else's concept of a higher power. We can come up with our own. This is, let me get to, in step 2, where is it? I thought I put, why do I not see it here? Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. In step 2, if we look in the workbook on pages 104 and 105, we have some questions on a higher power that we're going to be looking at. When we think about a higher power, let me see what's going on here. Why is my, the concept of a higher power can change over time. Like I've heard it compared to, I'm a little kid in the back seat of the car, a 2-year-old in a car seat, and God's the driver of the car. And all I'm doing is just going along for the ride, and I don't have to worry about anything because God's taking care of everything in the driver's seat. However, that can work for a long time, but as we learn and we grow, we can outgrow the concept of God being a higher power, of God being a parent with human limitations. And another concept might be that God is kind of like water, as an example, in that the belief might be, one person's belief was that God made hydrogen and oxygen and put them together in a way that made the elements water. But he set up the laws that govern these elements so that when water is too hot, it's a gas. When it's a regular temperature, it's a liquid. And when it's too cold, it's a solid, but it's still water. It's just becoming what it's meant to be at that exact moment based on God's rules and regulations. So for my higher power, for me, my higher power puts me in situations that he wants me to be in, and then guides me to do his will, no matter what form that takes. And through it all, I'm still me. So when we think about what the 12 steps have to say about who or what your higher power should be, it's really nothing, because we're the ones who decide who our higher power is. It's just something to whom that I can be surrendered to. So for me, my God is the God found in my scriptures. For other people, it might be nature or the principles of the program themselves. Some of us have a clear image of a specific God, while others have a vague sense of something greater and unattached to any religion. The point is, for the program, it doesn't matter what you call your God. It's whatever you need to be your God in order to move beyond the insanity of alcoholism running your life. So if we look in the workbook, on pages 104 and 105, hang on just a second. Let me see if okay. Let me, on these pages, hang on, I pulled it up here. Where is it? Okay. And you can get, this is in the workbook, and you can also download them individually. But in this activity, if you're not clear on your higher power, this is an activity that you can work on, again, for homework on your own, to help clarify. And even if you already have a clear relationship with your higher power, sometimes it helps to use these to rightly relate yourself to your higher power. So the activity goes, if you were to become paralyzed and had to hire someone to take care of you, what qualities would you want the person to have? And then you write that down in this space here. Or if you're about to be born and you're given the opportunity to describe the woman who is to be your mother, what qualities would you want her to have? And then you're asked the same question about who your father would be. What qualities would you want him to have? What things, this gets good. What things have you seen in your life that you would classify as a miracle? I mean, I always automatically put down the fact that I got to this program, that the miracle of being sober. What things have you seen that have inspired awe in you? I always, right away, what goes on for me is I always remember my first experience at the New Jersey convention when they had the old timers meeting, and they had all the old timers come walking in with the sound of the bagpipes and then playing Amazing Grace. For me, that was awe-inspiring. Think about how the world was created. What qualities do you think this power thing or person had in order to do this? And then you would write that down. Look at what you've written as your answers for these questions. And using these answers, what qualities would you like your higher power to have? And write those down. So that's the step 2 exercise, which again, you can download this individually, or you can get it from the book itself. We're the ones who decide who our higher power is. These questions are mainly geared for people who don't have a sense of a higher power, but there's some, they want to get clear on finding a higher power for themselves. Okay, so the only requirements for step 2 is to answer yes to this question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than me that can solve my problem? If you can say yes to this question, you're done with step 2. If you said no, you need to keep looking for things that you think are miracles and maybe ask yourself, well, who made this? And then let whatever your answer is be your first concept of a higher power. One person I heard said that something makes the sun rise every morning and set at night. So why not let that be your higher power? One thing we have to remember is that 12-step recovery is not self-help. At the root of self-help is the notion that I can help myself. At the root of the 12 steps is the notion that I cannot help myself, and trying to do so only gets me deeper into my alcoholism. The key to this program has nothing to do with me and my will, and everything to do with God as I understand God and my being surrendered to God. When I truly hit rock bottom, when I can do nothing to change my situation and simply howl in anguish and pain, then and only then am I willing to surrender to God. Real faith, the faith that will keep you working the 12 steps forever, requires hitting rock bottom and hitting it hard. It's important to understand that you cannot do anything to make yourself believe in a higher power who can restore you to sanity. However, as the rest of the steps will confirm, you can experience that higher power and come to believe as a result of that experience. So that finishes up step 2.
Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's Prayer for Mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.